of water in front of you?
I have a glass of wine.
Recorded live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. Today is the September 6th, 2013 edition. My name is William Hayashi. I'll be your host for tonight. And our special guest is Rasheedah Phillips I'm just going to read off here, Afrofuturist Affair. She wears many hats. She's an attorney, a public speaker, a writer, a mom, and I'm sure those are only maybe four of the things that she is. If you want to take a look at some of her work and know a little bit more about her, you could check it out at www.afrofuturistaffair.com or check her out on Tumblr at afrofuturistaffair.tumblr.com. And for those of you who may want to follow her after we're done, if you go to Twitter, you can find her at Afrofuturist, Afrofuture without an E, Affair, AFROFUTURAFFAIR. Rasheedah, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Where are you coming from? What city are you in right now?
I am in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And the weather? Is it reasonable?
It's nice out, actually. It's a little chilly, but it's a nice night for a Friday. So it's, very artsy night in our city.
Yeah, I was just noticing, I'm in Chicago, I was just noticing that it's starting to get darker earlier. Mm-hmm. I don't know why all of a sudden it started, I just noticed it now, but, I don't really like that because I'm not really a winter person.
Yeah, me neither. But yes, fall is peeking its head.
Yeah. Now, did you grow up in the area?
I came of age in the area, I would say. I'm actually originally from Trenton, New Jersey, which is about 45 minutes away from Philly.
Okay.
But I moved to Philadelphia when I was 14, and I went to high school and college out here and bought my first house here. So I would say, I consider myself from Philly.
All right. And what did you say, about 14 you moved there?
Yep, I moved out here when I was 15 years old. Yep.
And so you did much of your school there, and I would imagine most of your friends are there.
Yes.
What was it like growing up there?
It was interesting because when I moved out here, I was actually pregnant as a teen parent, and so my experiences like going through high school and going through college was really defined by me being a young mother. So I had some really interesting experiences. I wouldn't say I had a normal teenagehood or coming of age because I had sort of the responsibility of being a young mother. And going to school and trying to, juggle all of those different responsibilities.
And
but
how
good,
did you,
otherwise.
Well, no, I mean, obviously, as they say, you must have turned out all right. I mean, you're not in prison. You're not strung out on drugs. We can actually have a conversation and everything. So, I mean, even though you faced challenges, obviously you met them well. And they didn't hold you back. So I mean that I think that's probably the coolest, important part,
Yeah. Right.
So if I can ask, how old is your child or your children now?
My daughter, I have one child. She's 14 years old actually, and she is going to be starting high school on Monday.
Is she anything like you?
She is similar to me, but definitely her own person and her own, individual. She's into arts, but sort of in a different way than I am. I'm my art is more so writing. She's into drama, and she's actually going to be going to a performing arts high school. So she's into, singing and theater and things like that. So definitely artsy, taking after me in that sense, and in, some other ways, but definitely her own person for sure.
Well, which is what you hope. I mean, you don't want them to be little clones of you, and you don't want. I mean, that I drove my mother nuts because we were very, very similar temperamentally, and that was hard because whenever she would deal with me, I think it was like dealing with herself because we were so alike.
Standing in a mirror.
Yeah, and so does she have? Well, how about you? Do you have like good support people? You have friends. You have other people in the area that you do things with, that you collaborate with?
I do, and I actually not here anymore. It's just me and my daughter in terms of family, and my brother, he lives maybe about 20 minutes from me, but my mom is in Virginia. But even in that, I have an extended family definitely in Philly, and there's, Philly is a very, it's emerging in terms of art and, creativity, and especially sort of do-it-yourself creativity, DIY culture, and things like that. So, I have a lot of friends on that scene and in art and in music, so we definitely collaborate. And, honestly, if I didn't have those friendships and networks, I would not be able to, have my organization and have it be able to do all of the things that we're able to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were in college, or I guess your teen years, whatever, when you were at that formative period of time when you were kind of deciding which way you were going to go, what you were going to do, what kind of influences do you think brought you to where you are today?
I've had a lot of influences. I mean, college was a really great experience for me. I've always been interested in sci-fi. I've always loved science fiction since I was a child, as early as I can remember, and I've written it. But going to college and being exposed to different people and different educational tracks and different social mores, it really opened my mind. One thing that was really influential, I went to Temple University in Philly, which is home of one of the first African-American studies departments in the country. And, being able to take classes there really opened my mind to who I am and my identity as a black woman in ways that I, hadn't ever thought about or had to before. So I really had a great college experience, and there, even though I had a child and my daughter lived on campus with me actually, and I took on a heavy course load so that I could graduate a year early and go on to law school. So I was doing 18 credits a semester and going year round. But I still, I was able to play a leadership role. I started organizations in college, and, I was part of a lot of different groups and communities. So that's where I think my formative years in terms of taking on leadership roles and doing things like starting organizations and planning events and stuff like that really started in college for me.
And the school, not a lot of colleges are as accommodating for young and single mothers. I mean,
right.
What was your school like?
Temple was extremely supportive of my journey and my status as a parent. I actually was able to, and I sort of had to really advocate for myself in some sense because, they weren't really equipped to deal with that, even though it's a non-traditional sort of environment in terms of the people that come there. It's both traditional and non-traditional in the sense that the community that it's rooted in is mostly low income, and a lot of people who live in Philly, go to Temple for that reason, because it's affordable and because it's in a neighborhood. But anyway, so I don't know that they were 100% equipped for it, but, so I had to advocate for myself in some way. But they had on campus, they had graduate housing, which were small apartments, which also doubled as family housing. And so even though it wasn't really meant for undergrads or for people in my situation, I sort of wrote a letter and advocated, and so they let me live on campus in these grad apartments with my daughter. So in that sense, they were accommodating, and just the experiences that I had with professors, they saw that I worked hard and that I was ambitious and that I didn't, sort of use anything as an excuse in terms of having a child. And so, people were just, they responded well to that, and I was able to get scholarships, and, I had a lot of support at my school. So, I had a great experience there.
That for once you get kind of a good story coming out of a school like that, and I don't mean for Temple, but I'm just saying, first of all, going to college is hard. There's nothing really easy about it, especially if you're doing it, I almost said the right way, but then that begs for some definition of the right way. But if you're having a standard circumstance, a standard college circumstance, just the class load alone is difficult, and for you to double up on your not double up on your classes, but at least take a full class load. I remember the semesters where I said to myself, were you high when you decided to take 18 to 21 credits?
Yeah.
And I was going, well, I think maybe something happened to me when I was in line getting all those classes. But, I mean, it sounds like it worked well for you, but not because they were so, bending over backwards or anything, but because you made the accommodation work for you.
Right. And I definitely struggled. I had my moments of wanting to give up, and it was difficult. Because on top of the responsibility of being a student and being on your own for the first time, you also have a child. So
yes.
And I still had to take her to daycare every morning, and I had to work to put food on food on the table, and but it worked out. It was just a lot of sleepless nights, but it worked out for us. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, she's 14. She's getting ready to go into school, high school. She sounds like, a pretty independent personality, and also she sounds like, unless you're one of those mothers who just pushes her child and says, you're going to do this or you're going to do that, it sounds as though she has developed a good sense of self enough so that she's like pretty cool with picking what it is that she's excited about and what she's interested in.
Right.
When you were in college, you talked about, well, you kind of got into, I mean, is that when you started developing the whole, an interest in the science fiction, maybe writing, or where you are kind of now? Was it that early when it manifested itself?
So I would say, and the one thing that is a little, like, my daughter is not as into sci-fi as I am, so we don't share that.
Oh, no, yeah, but she's not your clone. Yeah, she's not your clone.
But yeah, as far as my love of sci-fi, so I've like I said, I've been into it all of my life as long as I can remember. Being 7 and 8 and reading like Christopher Pike books, even though they were supposed to be young adult books, and R.L. Stein and all of those books, and just being really excited about them, and also, as early as 6 and 7, writing my own stories, modeling after those books. So, like, my teacher was an alien. I wrote sort of like my own version of that. And, so I've always written. I've always been into sci-fi. But I think, and also in my teenage years, I remember, watching X-Files and being really inspired by that and saying, that's the kind of job I would have, which, piqued my interest a little bit in criminal justice, which eventually led to me going to law school, et cetera. But I think once I got to college, I became really disenchanted with sci-fi once I started taking African American studies classes and really more deeply analyzing these things and the things that I was reading and the culture of it. And I felt displaced from it, once I became more conscious of myself as a young black woman. And so for a while I sort of turned away from sci-fi. I think I didn't really write sci-fi. I didn't really, watch as much because, again, I didn't find myself reflected in it or my culture really reflected in the mainstream. And for some odd reason, I did not know about Octavia Butler. But it was when I got to law school, I met a friend, and she introduced me to Octavia Butler. So I was like 21 at this point, and she was like, oh, I think this is a book that you would really be interested in. And she gave me a copy of Kindred, and that was like a spiritual awakening for me to read an Octavia Butler book and for it to be, the protagonist to be a black woman and to reference, slavery and all of these cultural things that sci-fi, which is supposed to be so, essentially parable and about progression and about society, had not heretofore really reflected, things that were important to me as a black woman. And then to, be hit with Octavia Butler, I was just blown away, and my love of sci-fi was renewed, and that, took me on a search to then find other black sci-fi authors, and I, came across Tanana Reed Dew and Dark Matters, and then eventually I was led to Black Science Fiction Society, which was a whole another, revelation for me. So, yeah, so that was sort of my journey.
Well, I mean, you can't be faulted for that. I mean, I started out, if I were to be honest, I would say, well, okay, I'm twice your age. I hope I'm not. But, I mean, you're absolutely right, because back then, with very, 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 very minuscule few exceptions, if you were to look at science fiction, as some sort of indicator of where our society was going to go, we weren't going to be here.
Right. Right.
You know, because there was literally nobody writing about anything other than, you know, scientific whites or whatever who were going to be around in the future. And you know, of course, the classic story about Nichelle Nichols wanting to quit Star Trek after the first year because all she did was, she said she sat there with that damn thing in her ear. Mm-hmm. But then to have Martin Luther King Jr. say, no, you can't quit, that's kind of tough. I mean, that's a lot on you, but he was exactly right. Just seeing, you know, blacks existing in a future context was powerful. I mean, it's powerful for everybody because when you see, excuse me, people who look like you doing things that are cool, that are futuristic and stuff like that, it forces you, or not forces you, but allows you to imagine, you know, a circumstance where that happens. And it sounds like that was like the perfect experience for you, wasn't it?
Right. Exactly.
And so, you know, you had been writing early, you know, even before they gave you a sharp pencil. And when did you start really putting some stories together? About how old were you?
So when I sort of picked back up into, I mean, because around, I think I was maybe 14 and earlier when I was really like putting together some stories. But then I got pregnant and, you know, again, you know, just sort of disenchanted with science fiction and then school and things. So I just didn't really have a lot of time to engage in creative activities. But once I graduated law school, in my first year out of law school and working at my job, I took a creative writing course at the local community college. And that's when I started writing again and, you know, really, again, inspired by Octavia Butler and all of these new people I was coming across, like, I got to start writing again. And that's when I started saying, you know, I'm going to put together a book and I'm going to just really do this sci-fi stuff and thinking deeply. And it also, like, really coincided with a sort of spiritual awakening that I was going through, on a personal level and really coming into this knowledge and self-teaching myself about science principles and principles of physics and time travel, which I've always had a really deep interest in. And so I sort of, was going through some metaphysical things, which also inspired me to write more.
Okay, and so, I mean, how much, it's hard to ask this, but it's like, okay, so you take the class, you kind of get back into it, plus you're also skill set building too,
right?
Because, you know, that's what class is for. When did you, when did you sell your first story, or when did you publish your first story? You may not have sold it, but you may have published it.
So actually, I think I was 20. So first story that I actually had published wasn't a sci-fi story. It was actually just a short coming-of-age story that I had written. I think there was like a call for stories for this anthology or something like that. And it was a story that I had written when I was in college, and I had also taken a creative writing course. And it was about this young woman who's in this class, and she's challenged about her identity, and you know, she has to sort of stand up for herself in a room full of white people. So this was that story came directly out of, you know, really, again, going to college, taking these classes, mind expanding, and, you know, the frustrations that I had always had pent up about, you know, the condition of people of color in America. So that's my first published story, short fiction story. But then when I had graduated law school and then started taking this course, all I could think about was sci-fi. And so every prompt that we had, every writing prompt, every, you know, portfolio that we had to put together, my stories were sci-fi themed. And then one of my classes, the teacher was just like, you know, these stories are good. You need to sort of develop them more. And so that's when I really took an active interest in being published, and at this point I sort of had joined Black Science Fiction Society and was like really inspired by all of these self-published authors and these indie authors, and I was really like, oh, I can do this too. This is awesome. This is really inspiring. So that's when I really started pushing to have my stories published in sort of non-traditional venues. And came across authors who were just really willing to publish my work. So my second published story was a sci-fi story, and it was published in this magazine called Neon 5 magazine. And then my third published sci-fi short was a part of the Possibilities anthology, which came out of a blog hop called the State of Black Science Fiction, which authors from Black Science Fiction Society have put together and I had participated in. So that's where my third story sort of came out of. And then after that, I through my activities with my organization and some collective that I had formed, we started publishing zines. And right now I'm really working on trying to get my own novel finished and published. And that's going to be a independent effort as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? You don't have to give it away, but what's the storyline for it?
Yeah. It's based on time travel. Again, I'm really very deeply into time travel, and I'm one of those people, like, I'm very selective about the type of sci-fi. I don't know if everybody's like this, but I'm selective about the type of sci-fi that I enjoy. Like, I can't just enjoy any sci-fi. I'm not like really into space operas or so much aliens unless it's really well written. I'm more so like practical, down to earth type of sci-fi, really hard sci-fi stuff and physics and time travel, that's really based on actual physics stuff. So my novel is revolving around that. It's as hard sci-fi as I can possibly get it, but also metaphysical around time travel and around sort of exploring other avenues of time travel that don't involve, a time machine contraption, but really involve sort of everyday principles of just breaking down, physics principles, so like principles of light and principles of reflection and mirrors and, how the brain sort of processes time and, so really digging into those things and applying it to, an everyday experience of a person who's struggling with, some personal issues and trying to work through that. So,
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, to add to that, it's I'm trying to make it a non-traditional format. It's really experimental, and I'm inspired by the book The House of Leaves and sort of just or people like Borges or Calvino who write sort of experimental sci-fi and put things together differently. So part of my book is like it's a narrative, but there's also like a time travel manual that's a part of it, and there's like an index, and there's really a lot of like research, because part of the thing that I want to get across is that the line between science and fiction is really blurred, and what we call sci-fi, I really see it as something that manifests itself in our real world, and it can, so I really feel like I can time travel, or, I can't, it's really just about how I think and how, the type of reality that I accept, and, so that's the other part of it, is that it's experimental, and, I feel like when I was taking classes, I was discouraged from doing an experimental sort of novel, because it's like, well, you're not a seasoned enough writer to do that. You need to do things the traditional way. But
right.
Again, really like meeting people on Black Science Fiction Society, meeting these other authors who just went out on a limb and were like, forget that, traditional, you do your own thing. I was inspired to keep going with my thought about how I want the novel to play out.
Well, I mean, and there's 2 points that I just got. That one is that the difference between science and science fiction is a moving target.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
Because what we have now in terms of science, just back in the Star Trek, when the original Star Trek came out, the Star Trek days, was science fiction. I mean, you look at the communicators, you look at our cell phones, you look at the iPads, you look at their data pads, so there's always that revolving kind of moving target of what really constitutes science and science fiction.
Right.
And the second thing is yes, it's a good idea to get your fundamentals down and know how to be a good writer before you do experimental stuff. But sometimes something speaks to you, and conceptually, if it works, you don't want to waste time doing something that's Jarvis's phone, that something that detracts from the project at hand.
Right.
I hope he mutes his phone. Anyway, so that's kind of good. And it sounds as though you're doing an enormous amount of research in terms of the science in order to hang on a second. In order to get your scientific principles down, how much research are you doing on that sort of thing?
A lot of research, and really, because I've been working on this book for the better of 4 years or so, and it's because it's like I learn stuff every day, and it's so interesting to me that I spend a good 80% of my time researching and very little time writing, and then science is it's changing so much, it changes every second basically, and so it's hard to sort of freeze a book in time when it's like the things that I'm writing about are in constant update. And the thing, and the awesome thing about delving into this research is that, just like what you said about, Star Trek and cell phones, it's like the things that people think are fictional or are not possible, they're actually experimenting on all the time, transporting and, teleportation and all of these things they're actually experimenting on in these labs. But, that stuff is not easily or public knowledge all the time. It's sort of just you have to reach out and find it. It's not everyday news for people. So people, think of these concepts as being so far removed from reality, but they're not. And it to me it comes down to privilege and who's privileged enough to be able to experiment and to define what science is and to define the laws of science. And it's like everybody should have that privilege. Everybody should be able to engage in these principles and understand them and figure out what reality looks like or is conceived of, and not just let it be handed to them. And the other point to piggyback off of what you were saying about, science and fiction, even in the opposite sense of scientists, consulting science fiction writers or science fiction writers being actual physicists or, physicists or scientists being inspired by dreams, to resolve problems in reality. These things, like you said, it's a moving target. It's a very blurred line.
Excuse me. I went through that. I kind of had a similar experience when I wrote my first book. Obviously the internet helps a lot, but I had to call the head research librarian down at NASA to ask some questions.
Wow.
And it was pretty cool because the questions I asked, she said, I don't know about that. Can I put you on hold while I talk to an engineer? So she went and talked to an engineer, and she said, hey, the gang they're gonna look at what you said, and then we'll call you back tomorrow. So
wow.
I mean, the excitement that they have when somebody calls up and says, "Hey, could this happen?" And I'll even tell you what it was. I had an idea on how to get a shuttle as far out as the moon. So, I called them. I didn't know who else to call. So I dialed a number. They give me the librarian, and then they say, oh, that's an interesting idea. Can we call you back tomorrow? And so the actual NASA guys are calling me back. So, I mean, and when you talk about the overlap, you've got engineers out there. You've got scientists. You've got social engineers. Excuse me, the soft science engineers out there who are they're all invested in the future. They're all invested in figuring out what the future is going to be like. Right. Because in order for them to do their jobs, they have to figure out exactly, where people are going to go, what are going to be the motivating forces. And so I think that's why we have such a high overlap with technical types and very well educated types and this genre. Because
right.
I don't think you can be stupid and write compelling science fiction. Okay?
Right.
I mean, and I've read some bad stuff. I'm not going to lie, and I'm not naming names. But I've read some bad stuff, and it's like a bad movie that forces you to have to suspend your disbelief,
right.
because what just happened is just so crazy. You go, that would never happen. I'll give you the biggest example that really kind of cranks me. On TV, you have all these science fiction stories. You got Eureka, you've got Stargate, you've got, let's go back to Star Trek. In all of these stories, somebody gets caught in another dimension, okay? And so people can walk right through them. My question was always, what the hell are they standing on? What are they standing on? If they're in another dimension and people can walk through them, they can't feel the floor. So that always, little things like that. And an engineer would know that, a physicist would know that, an empiricist would know that, and I think that the better writers stay away from those kinds of situations.
Yeah. And
it sounds to me like you don't want to make those kinds of mistakes. I didn't want to make those kinds of mistakes when I wrote. So it sounds like that's a very important facet of your creative universes, that they be consistent and they be at least plausible.
Right. Exactly.
So, excuse me. You get into your writing. You've got the book going. What else? Well, tell us a little bit about. You've got these. You've got the Afrofuturist affair.
Right.
And you kind of glommed onto the, at least the term and title. How did you come by that, and what kind of motivated that, and things like that?
Okay, so I think what motivated is that a couple different factors sort of played into the start of the organization. One is that I had come across Black Science Fiction Society and was just super inspired, super happy about, finding this whole world of Black people into science fiction. And, there was events going on, and it was all sorts of fascinating things to get into. And I'm like, oh, I want that happening in Philadelphia. Like, that needs to be here. We need to have some sort of branch or something. So that was the first thing. And then simultaneously, so I have a lot of friends who do spoken word poetry and who are artists and read at open mics and things like that. And I felt like there wasn't place for somebody like me who was into science fiction and wanted to read, my stuff out loud. I didn't really feel comfortable doing it at an open mic, which is mostly spoken word. And I had been part of like writing groups, but it wasn't like, a wider audience for it. So my idea at first was to start sort of a open mic specifically for sci-fi, and so that was the thought about that. And then the third thing that sort of connected all three of those things, one day I was on Black Science Fiction Society and saw an advertisement for an Afrofuturism exhibit at the Harriet Tubman Museum in Georgia. And I had never, and this was like two and a half years ago or so, I had never prior to that heard the term Afrofuturism. But as soon as I saw that word, I was like, oh, that is that it immediately and intuitively clicked with me as being something that, I wanted to be a part of, and that just made a lot of sense. Just the name alone was just like, oh, and so I started getting into Afrofuturism and started doing my research around it, and I was like, I want to do a event around this theme, and I want to invite people who I know. It's like I said, as soon as I heard that word and started researching it, so many things fell into place about what was going on around me and what people were engaging in but weren't really calling it Afrofuturism. And, so I saw those different connections and, and it wasn't, even for my friends and my associates and other creative people that I knew who weren't doing like Black sci-fi. You couldn't call it Black sci-fi, but you could call it Afrofuturism. The themes that were inherent to it I look at Black Sci-Fi as sort of being a branch of Afrofuturism, but it's its own thing as well. But so, again, they weren't necessarily maybe doing Black Sci-Fi, but they were dealing with the concepts that, could be called Afrofuturism. So I was like, I need to do something themed around that so that it's not just people reading sci-fi, but it's people who are engaged in Afrofuturism culture, and that's how the Afrofuturist Affair was sort of born out of that. The name, I'm so bad at naming things. I had, before, I used to always throw parties in college, and it would be themed parties, and I had this party a couple years ago called something affair, and it was like this futuristic, it was called the Futuristic Affair. And again, I didn't know about the term Afrofuturism, but it, looking back, it was definitely a precursor to what this would become. And so I just sort of took that name from it, and I was like, oh, Afrofuturist Affair, and it was really meant to be one event. It just started off as one event, and, I got people my artist friends to come and do, themed poetry and art and music around Afrofuturism, and all of the proceeds to benefit a local charity called Need Indeed, which does service learning projects in, sort of urban middle schools around topics like homelessness and teen pregnancy. So that's what it all started out as, and it was just going to be this one event, and I was like, oh, I get to have Black Sci-Fi writers there and, just be in my own world of Black Sci-Fi and Afrofuturism. But the response from it was so great that, I was just really inspired to continue. And, the more I opened my consciousness to Afrofuturism, the more I started seeing it in my environment. So I would meet all of these people and just come across all of these things that were, Afrofuturism that really weren't kind of in my consciousness before. And I think, it's a really great thing to be a part of this culture as it emerges and as it's, being formed and becoming a thing. It's so lovely to be a part of that flow and, to help, shape what it is and what it could become, so.
You mentioned, hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. Tonight is the September, or actually, whenever you listen to this, it's the September 6, 2013 edition, and we have Rasheedah Phillips of out in. Are you in Philly proper?
Yep, in Philly. Yep.
Okay, so she's in Philly proper. She's not in a suburb. She's not hanging out, in some Tony place, And we're talking about, her Afrofuturism. She's an attorney, a writer. Let's talk about the attorney part a little bit. Are you practicing law full time?
Yep, I practice law full time. I'm a public interest attorney. I work at a organization called Community Legal Services in Philadelphia. It's a nonprofit legal services organization, and we serve low-income members of the community who can't afford attorneys. They get attorneys at no cost to them, and we specialize in different areas of law. Specifically, I do housing work right now, so I defend people who are being, evicted from their homes, who live in public housing specifically, or who have repair issues or domestic violence issues and need transfer. So I do all sorts of things with housing issues. Before that, and I've been at Community Legal Services for going on 5 years this week, actually. And prior to doing housing work, I was doing community economic development, working with child care providers, low-income child care providers and nonprofits, helping them get started and helping them get through the hurdles to become licensed child care providers. And I was doing zoning work. I've also done consumer housing work, defending people who are being foreclosed upon, due to, predatory lending and, all sorts of things. So a very varied practice I've been able to engage in, and I really, really love my job. I love the work that I do. It's extremely satisfying to be able to serve people and also to be a part of policy change for low-income people. And, I really just love, I can't say enough that I have a perfect job. even though, it's not I don't make what a typical corporate attorney would make, of course, so there is, some sacrifices in that area, but, I'm happy. I was even being, myself not too far away from low income, I've been able to buy a house and, send my daughter to a private school for a while, and then that's more so because I'm resourceful. I know sort of how to tap into resources more so than it has to do with my income or anything. So, I think that I'm living a charmed life, because I love going to work, and doing what I do. So,
your life, just thinking about your life, I had to sit further down in my chair because it's exhausting. No, it's pretty cool. To be able to do advocacy and to do advocacy in a way that doesn't burn you out. Because, I'll be honest, I've been in and out of doing different kinds of advocacy, chairing, boards and things like that. And sometimes you can get burnout. And, and the fact that, it's obvious when you listen to you are pretty psyched about your job. It sounds like you're happy about it. If your job makes you happy, that's a pretty cool thing, because not a lot of people get that. Not a lot of people get a happy job, and especially in a tight economy. You're finding people who are having to do a lot of different things. I practice, I would say a couple times a week, I practice some things in case, like, the bottom really falls out. Yeah. So I'm very good at saying, will that be paper or plastic? And I'm also very good at saying, would you like fries with that? Because you have to have skills to fall back on, and a lot of people don't realize that. And a reversal can happen most any time, but it's so cool that you take care of people who need that, sometimes need that little push, that need that little help, need that little leg up.
Right.
And yet, you've got all these other things, too. In a normal day, take us through, like, your normal day. You get up, maybe you go to work. When do you have time to do, your creative part and things like that?
Well, thank God my daughter's 14. I'll say that. If she wasn't, at this age and able to be, more independent and catch the bus on our own and, things like that, I would not be able to do as much as I am able to do now. But a typical day, I work a sort of standard 9 to 5. That's also the good thing about my job, is that I'm not working 70 hours a week. It's quite family friendly. I'm able to work usually 9 to 5. There are, of course, days where I have to work past that, and I also am a part of the boards of a couple nonprofits in Philadelphia too. So there are nights where I have to work late, but typically on a good day, I'm home by 6. I cook dinner, do all the things that I need to do. By 9, get my daughter off, to bed, and then from 10 to, about 1 or 2, which is when I go to bed, I'm doing Afrofuturist Affairs stuff. And on the weekends, and, that's the other great thing, is that I get weekends off. So, all weekend I'm pretty much blogging and planning and, sending emails and throwing my events. I'm also a part of, I helped form a collective called Metro Polarity, which is a sci-fi collective of different organizations and people. And so, I have a lot of friends who help me out and do different things for the organization too. So, just working with them and collaborating is also how I'm able to get, a lot of stuff done. But I have a lot of energy, I don't know why, but I have a lot of energy.
Oh, yeah, I can tell. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And I'm up late, I don't get a lot of sleep, and, I'm happy I'm young still, relatively speaking. I'm, going to be 30 in a few months, so, pushing it, but I'm still relatively young, so, at least for the next 5 years or so, I'll be able to keep it going, I think.
No, it's good because, you're at a perfect age to have all of these divergent things going on, and you have the energy to sustain it. So let's talk about what are some of the current projects you're working on now, and also let me remind you of anytime you're going to have an event or anytime you're going to appear someplace, be sure to go ahead and post it up on the events calendar at blacksciencefictionsociety.com. Because, people who may be coming into a weekend or something like that, may stop by, take a look, and go, oh, look at this thing. You know, I heard about Rasheedah on the radio, blah, 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 and she's going to be at so-and-so and such. And I think it's good to, you know, for your standard networking. But I think it's also, you know, if I were at a convention and all of a sudden some people troop by and they said, oh, yeah, you know, we've seen you at BSFS, nice to meet you, things like that, it helps cement and grow at the same time our community.
Right. For sure.
So what are some of your current projects right now that you're working on?
So we have a lot of stuff going on, and when I say it's mostly me. I do, you know, the bulk of the everyday work, but like I said, we have a lot of collaborators and people who support us. The big thing that we do annually is the Charity and Costume Ball. Like I said, that was the very first event that we did, and this is going to be the third time that we throw it. Last year we started a grant called the Futurist Fund, and that's so from the first event that we did, all of the funds went to Need and Deed, but I wanted to sort of start something where I could give people sort of a helping hand, because and that came out of two things. First, it's seeing every day, you know, sort of the poorest of the poor people in Philly, and how things like $15 and $20 will make a difference to somebody. You know, it can make a difference between somebody eating or being able to keep their electricity on. And so, you know, there's not always resources, and although there's a lot of resources, you know, which we're really grateful for, there's not always resources for that sort of emergency situation. So I wanted to be able to start something to where people could, you know, it's not a lot of money. We're not a nonprofit corporation or anything, but just something that came out of the proceeds of the events, and, you know, because I don't feel like I feel very fortunate to be able to live the life that I live, and to be able to make a salary doing what I do. And, you know, even though I struggle too, I feel like, you know, I'm very fortunate, and I didn't want to just pocket that money. You know, I wanted to, you know, even in the mission of Afrofuturism and giving back, you know, and it being communal in a sense, you know, I wanted all of that money to be able to go towards the community. So last year we started the Futurist Fund, and we were able to use all of the proceeds from the events to award to people in the community. So we were able to give this woman $250 who she had lost family members and was just really going through a very hard time. And, you know, we gave her money. And this other young teen parent was having a really rough time with her pregnancy. We were able to award her funds. And then the other inspiration behind the grant is that for me, being a young parent, when I was a teen parent, I would not have been able to get through college and get through high school if it hadn't been for scholarships and, you know, grants and people who really just believed in me and believed in my story and allowed me to sort of craft my future without being, you know, letting the stigmatization of being a young parent hold me back, because it did for a long time, you know, for at least a year or so, and also because my mother was a teen mother, you know, so I grew up with a young mother and sort of had to watch her struggle. You know, for a while I internalized that and that imagery of what a teen mom is in our society, and it held me back. But I had people who recognized my intellect and recognized my ability and really encouraged me, and also, you know, helped me get through college financially, because I would not have been able to do it. So out of those experiences, that was why I wanted to make that the Futurist Fund. So we have the annual ball coming up, which is the big fundraiser for that. And then leading up to the ball, we have some events going on. We do a Afrofuturist mask-making workshop in preparation for the ball. We work with an organization called not an organization, it's a radio show in Philly called Black Tribbles, which is five black sci-fi geeks who do a weekly radio show about topics in sci-fi. A few months ago and coming up in November, with them, we collaborated and did an event called Octavia City, which brings Afrofuturist and black sci-fi writers upcoming and also seasoned, and we read our stories on the radio. So it's like a story hour. It was really cool, so we're going to do that again. And I have a bunch of different stuff coming up. I'm also going to be working with the Studio Museum in Harlem, which is really awesome. I'm excited about that. I'm not going to yet reveal because I don't know if I'm supposed to be talking about it, but I'm really excited. They have a huge Afrofuturism exhibit coming up, and so I'm supposed to be taking part in that in some sense. And then I do workshops. Been doing a quantum time capsule workshop. I've done that a few times with youth groups and also with adults, and it's making a time capsule sort of based on a principle of quantum physics, and, you know, it's a time capsule where you can communicate with any part of time. You know, it's not just meant for the future or for somebody to open in the future. It's like, you know, sort of something you can reach out to different aspects of time, and it's really embedding those, you know, sort of time travel principles that I talked about earlier. So we have that going on, and then we blog. You know, the blog is I've been very fortunate to have a blog that has become popular and that people use as a resource. You know, that was unexpected, but it's a beautiful thing to, you know, have people, you know, just really reference the blog as being a good resource on Afrofuturism. And the blog is a Tumblr blog, so, you know, I post original content when I'm able to, and I do occasionally do analysis and creative critical writing about sci-fi, and so I try to make original posts, but I'm mostly just posting about events and, you know, imagery and things going on in the Afrofuturism community, because I'm really interested. You know, there's sort of an academic side of Afrofuturism, and, you know, that's really where the term came out of and where the bulk of the intellectual thought has been established. But the side that I'm really interested in engaging in is the practice of Afrofuturism and sort of the community aspect of it and culture that has emerged from sort of the academic definition or characterization of Afrofuturism. So I'm really interested in how it manifests in reality in terms of the principles, you know, that come under Afrofuturism. So we got all types of stuff going on and things that are ongoing and events that we do in collaboration. But definitely I will keep people up to date on Black Science Fiction Society. And, you know, we're on Facebook as well, and you can catch us on our Tumblr page. And, you know, we really try to be everywhere on the net. We're on YouTube. We're on and all that good stuff too.
All right, I'm going to back the truck up about 8 minutes. About 8 minutes. When is the ball? You didn't tell anybody when the ball was. Oh yeah, we're having this ball, and, you know, it's going to do these good things, and it's sometime. I mean, seriously, because I'm serious because, you know, you never know who's going to be traveling. And you never know who's going to, you know, people pick this up as a podcast too. So, excuse me, after a very short time after the show is over, it does go up as a podcast, so you can also send your people locally to listen to it too, who may not know. So when is the ball?
So the ball is going to take place this year on Saturday, November 9th, and it's going to be at Window Factory Arts, Myth Media Studios here in Philly at 2301 North 9th Street. It is we've done a call for artists. We are accepting submissions, proposals for any type of art, visual art, authors, photographers, whoever, you know, wants to be involved and does Afrofuturist or Black sci-fi related work or creative output. And we have an Indiegogo campaign going on. We're taking submissions up until September 30th, and you can submit at afrofuturistafair@gmail.com. We also have an Indiegogo campaign going on because, you know, in the past, most of the artists who have come to and been involved in the Afrofuturist Affair, they have graciously volunteered their time because they know that the proceeds are going towards this community grant. But I would love to be able to, you know, pay the artists, even if it's, you know, a minimal amount, but just in appreciation, because, you know, people come from out of town to attend and to be a part of it, and, you know, we just really appreciate their time. So we have the Indiegogo campaign going on, and hopefully, you know, people can contribute to it. We got some nice gifts to give to people if you make a donation. And, we want everybody to participate. It's been such a great, energy around it. And some people that we've had in the past have found us through Black Science Fiction Society. We've had, like, the author Nicole Scaniers, who wrote Escape from Beckyville and Jaja Medjay. And, last year we had there was a black female who was running for president of the United States, very little known. Her name is Petta Lindsay. She was on the ballot in about 13 states, I think, and she came through and did a campaign speech, and it's just really wonderful energy and sort of unique and different people coming through there and presenting their Afrofuturistic visions. And this year our theme for the ball is Dark Phase Space, which phase space is this concept in physics, which an object existing within all different possibilities and spaces, and so dark phase space is just looking at blackness and all of its different representations throughout, space. So I said a mouthful.
Do you have like, you mentioned it's a ball, but do you have other kinds of activities? Do you have panel discussions? Do you have, obviously it sounds like you have speakers who are going to be there and talking. So it is more like, excuse me, it's more like a, like a convention or like an Afrofuturist convention with a ball,
I would say, you could call it that, or you could call it sort of a showcase, if you will. I mean, we have vendors there, people who come and sell their books and jewelry and things like that, and then also, we've had speakers. We don't really do a panel, although I've play with the idea of it, because we do that stuff throughout the rest of the year. So, like, I've collaborated with other organizations who have done panels and have invited me to come speak on their panels or to moderate. And, I do workshops throughout the year. So, we don't fold everything into that one event. That one event is more so about showcasing artistry in a sense, but there's definitely a variety of things and people and activities that happen at the ball itself, and a lot of it it's also about the costume too, because if you read into Afrofuturism and you find that it does it has a certain aesthetic which varies across interpretation and who's doing it, but it definitely has an aesthetic, and so it's so interesting for people to come and you see what they put together in terms of the costume, and it's really a way that even if you're not presenting or doing art, to be a part of the art of the event and to be a part of the culture by dressing in the garb of Afrofuturism. And people come up with some really awesome costumes, and we've been fortunate to have a photographer there who has done pop-up photo shoots. So if you go and look at the pictures, you'll see some really awesome pictures of people, and they look like things out of movies, and I've had like an engineer there who's come and he makes like different pieces, and he had like this glowing stick that was, it's really fun, and it's
it sounds like it's a confluence of science, of fiction, of futurism, of even some costume role playing and things like that.
Right.
It sounds like a great event. It's interesting enough, and it's far enough in the future that if I can get this sheriff's ankle bracelet off, maybe I can stop by and see what it's all about.
Oh, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, it'd be good for me too. This thing's giving me a rash. Okay, so let's flash forward. Let's flash forward in about 5 years. Your book will probably be out, or at least you hope it will be. Yeah. You don't know. My first book took me like 9 months to write, but I was newly divorced and I had some things that I had to get off my chest.
Yeah.
But you don't know, and my second book took, I did that. The second one of a trilogy came 11 years later.
Wow.
So you don't know. You don't know exactly what the timing is going to be. But if you had to guess, if you had to think it out, where do you think you might be, maybe 5 years from now?
5 years from now. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping I'll still be around doing this work, and that it will have grown to where I'm able to take part in the international culture of Afrofuturism. And I feel myself moving in that direction already because of the people that I've connected with through this, organization and through the things that we're doing, and people around the world who are engaging in Afrofuturism and really, connecting with each other. So I'm hoping that continues and that the culture grows and that, it becomes a fixture and a mainstay as a part of our culture, and that I continue to be able to evolve with it and to evolve my organization so that it is, a go-to resource for Afrofuturism and Black sci-fi, and in much the way that Black Science Fiction Society is, that go-to resource, and I can't say enough how much I'm inspired by, what that site has become and how it, has opened my mind, and I'm sure, everybody on there in some sense, to the possibilities of what Black sci-fi can do, as not just as social commentary, but as world building, the real world, real world building, and and I hope we take over, and that we continue to, and that we begin to dominate this field of science fiction, and that our ideas, first that we can profit off them to then put back into our community and continue to build our community. And that's really what I'm interested in doing with Afrofuturism. It is one thing to sort of engage with people who are, to speak to the choir, as they say, people who are already conscious of this and who have sort of a leg up. But I want to use this to continue to advocate, in the community, in terms of the Black community, low-income community, people who don't have means or who have been historically underrepresented and historically stigmatized, and really, just helping them to use this concept as a liberating tool and as a tool for empowerment. And I've been fortunate to be able to hold Afrofuturism workshops in community organizations. So this one organization that I did an Afrofuturism workshop was a prison transition program, and people immediately hooked on to the concept. They had never, again, just like me, I had never heard the term Afrofuturism, but once I engaged them with it and engaged them with Black sci-fi or sci-fi and the stereotypes in sci-fi, the conversation was so lively, among that audience that, it was just really a mind-blowing experience, and I hope to continue to be able to do that so that Afrofuturism, and even if it's not that term, but the concepts inherent to Black sci-fi and Afrofuturism are a household thing that people can then use to explore possibilities beyond the ones that, are routinely presented to us.
So you're looking at it more as Afrofuturism as sociology, not
right.
just fictional writing.
Right.
So you're looking at it as a sociology. You're looking at it as this could be a driver of community, in that the concepts can give, let's say, give inspiration to the young, because
right.
then they may pick up some ideas, they may become creative, they may see things that, we would have to, the notion that everybody thinks they're going to have a better future than their parents seems a little old-fashioned and quaint up against right. the realities of the financial situation, the economy that our country is facing. So right. you have a whole disenfranchised generation out there, white, Black, Asian, what have you, and so now looking at Afrofuturism as sociology gives you kind of like a lever or a fulcrum from which you can start moving a community, or you can start instilling a community with differing values that may be more survival oriented.
Right, exactly, and that's the driving force behind the grant, and really a lot of what we do. There's the fun aspect of Afrofuturism and the part that is purely creative expression, but there's also a part of it I think that can really open up not only dialogue but really action about what the future is going to look like and who is able to participate in building it. And I think, particularly introducing Afrofuturism to young people, again, opens them up to possibilities aside from the ones that they're presented with in the media of, what people of color or like anybody, like you said, and more and more as I grow older and sort of more mature, I see things as not always black and white, but it really sometimes is poor against non-poor, and that can be white, and that can be, can look different ways. And, what is black culture? Is it just, people with brown skin? What does it look like? So I'm starting to think about these things in a very nuanced way, and again, I think Afrofuturism is helping with that. And, there's lots of questions, and there's lots of things that need to happen, but I think the possibility is so right with it, for everybody, and there's like this question of whether white people can engage in Afrofuturism, and I'm very up in the air about that. And, one thing that is interesting about it is that the term was coined by a white man, and, I've spoken previously about how I felt about that, and, and it may not be a very popular opinion, so I'm going to just reserve that. But I think, again, that it's just really ripe with possibility, and it gives people a different image and a different worldview rather than the one that we've been presented with through both science and science fiction, which is, sort of the mirror reflection of what science is in a sense. So.
And so, obviously, if from a legal perspective, using your career, you've done some community outreach. You continue to do community outreach. Have you done anything more along the creative side in terms of community outreach, maybe with the young or anything like that? Or are you doing your community and your own world building basically through your creative writing endeavors?
I think it's both. I think one feeds the other. My day job in terms of being an attorney and the experiences that I've had there have really, contributed to my ability to form this organization, just the skills that I've learned in terms of organizing and, representing nonprofits and businesses. I think having that experience really helped me to build a successful sort of model of the organization. It's not perfect. It's not huge. It's primarily run by one person. We're not making a lot of money, but in terms of, we're really not making any money at all, but in terms of just like the structure of it, I think, and it being well organized came out of those experiences. So that feeds into that. And then vice versa. I think I try to bring sort of creative advocacy to what I'm doing at work. And then, again, using those work skills to then apply to what I'm doing in my creative work. And one really feeds the other. And I'm trying to, like I said, in terms of blurring that line between science and fiction, the things that I write about in sci-fi are really, to me, real. Like, I don't, in my mind, for the purposes of living in a collective world, I have to sort of concede that it's sci-fi in some sense or that it's fictional. But the experiences are out of real things that have happened to me or that I've seen or that I've thought about. So when I say that it has a very metaphysical, spiritual thing for me, it sci-fi and Afrofuturism manifests in sort of my everyday life and my everyday thinking. So when I think about time and, how I organize my day and my time, it has a very sci-fi element to it. It's really not it's not much of a big difference for me. And, being able to write sci-fi is cathartic. It's cathartic. It's a release and it's an escape, and it allows me to put into practice things that are, in my head or whatever. So, I sci-fi as sort of that grounding thing for me.
And a lot of people don't look at it as sociology. They look at it as telling a story. And for you, obviously there's the investment, there's the psychological investment in what Afrofuturism means in the broader context for you as a person. And it also sounds a little bit like it drives your motivations in a way that, you know, okay, I think this about our society. I think this about, you know, the evolution of what may be coming next.
Right.
And for you, it's not just, it doesn't sound like it's just the basis for a story. It's like, this makes sense. This is something that should happen, should not happen, however you frame it in your head. And then it's like you're automatically applying it to, you know, the sociology of the world around you, the real world around you. So for you, Afrofuturism is certainly more than just a writing genre. It's a complete way of looking at the community you belong in, how you fit into that community, and according to what you just said, where that community can and should go.
Right.
Would that be fair?
That is extremely fair. Exactly. And you know, it's to me, Afrofuturism becomes interesting because when you look at other sort of futurism-based genres that aren't Afrofuturism, you know, the concern is really about the future, and it's about, you know, where we're going and what technology looks like. And, you know, but for me, Afrofuturism is different. You know, it stands out from that because it looks at time sort of in a way that the ancients looked at time. You know, back, you know, in the day, you know, time wasn't considered on a linear scale. It was considered sort of cyclical and, you know, all of those sorts of principles that we read about. And I think Afrofuturism really brings that into play because when you look at the culture and the influences, you see that people are drawing influences not only from the future and, you know, technology, but also from the past and past technology and what things look like for the ancients and also from the present. So it's saying that time is not linear and, you know, the past is behind us and the future is ahead. It's saying that it's all influencing each other and that, you know, you can't have the present without the past and vice versa. And, you know, even on into the future, you know, the future is made up of those past moments and those present moments. So that's what I think makes Afrofuturism very unique and very relevant because with other futurism or even just, you know, sci-fi, like I said, I'm into a very specific type of sci-fi, and I can enjoy sci-fi movies. But like you were saying earlier, it's hard for me to get lost in a movie where it's 2,000 years from now and it's in space and it's so far out of space that it would be impossible for us. I'm never going to see that. My child's never going to see that. You know, so it's hard for me to get lost in that. Whereas, you know, something that's in the here and now or something that can draw influences from different areas of time and doesn't put itself so far out of my range of experience, I can really get into. And I think that's what Afrofuturism does. And it brings in those, those present-day concerns and those ongoing concerns of equality and you know, representation and all of those things. So that's what I love about Afrofuturism.
So, I mean, it sounds like the concept itself, the idea itself, is something that's been with you for a long time. I mean, how old were you when you started thinking in terms, in these kinds of terms? You know, in terms of, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think before I had a name for it, it was with me, you know, and I think before it had a name, before, you know, because it was coined in 1994. But, you know, the concept of Afrofuturism has always been present. You know, Sun Ra, you know, for example, who is, you know, one of the foremost examples of Afrofuturism, he was around, you know, before the term came about. So I think the phenomena that is Afrofuturism is not bound to that term. It's something that's always been around. It's just been called different things or not recognized. But, you know, Afrofuturism, you know, which is, I think, an imperfect term for it, but I think it's the best one that we have for now to be able to put all of these things under one umbrella and, you know, have a language that, terms and a language behind it that people can understand and engage in and can communicate with. So I think that's the importance of it. But, yes, I definitely think that I've had these concepts within me, long before I had ever heard the term Afrofuturism. But once I heard it, it gave a label to what my experiences were that I couldn't prior to, label it, or talk, have a language to talk about it with other people and have them understand, what I was talking about.
Talk to us a little bit about, the science fiction scene in Philly.
Oh, so the science fiction scene in Philly is amazing. It's really growing. And again, I think I'm very happy to be part of that evolution. I feel like a lot of people, had the same ideas around the same time, or like we all sort of came into this consciousness and realized that, we were all interested in this. So when I started my organization, right around the same time, this other black sci-fi author in Philly started a group reading of sci-fi stories, queer sci-fi. So I've connected with him, and then we started, along with other people, a collective called Metro Polarity, where we're doing sort of world building, and we're publishing zines and really engaging in emancipatory sort of sci-fi as a collective and exploring these ideas. So that's that. We're throwing events and throwing parties, and a lot of people are really interested in it and getting into it. Something I've seen happening in the past couple months and years are that people are starting to throw like sci-fi themed events. And again, maybe some of the stuff was around before, I became conscious of it, but it seems like it's really growing, and that a lot of people are catching on to it, which is a wonderful thing. So there was this summer camp called Girls Rock Philly, and their theme for their summer camp was time travel. And so I went in and did a workshop for them on time travel for their campers, and so things like that happening. And there's BlackSciFi.com, which is based in Philly. There's the Black Tribbles, which does the radio show on sci-fi related stuff. There's a couple other conventions. We have the Philly Sci-Fi Convention that happens every year. So I think there is a strong community that is really growing, and the concept of non-traditional, not your great-grandfather's sci-fi is really emerging, because you see a lot more diversity and range of people engaging in it and people writing stories. So through these events, I've met a lot of different, people of color and queer people who are writing sci-fi based on their experiences and based on their, whatever cultures and communities they engage in. And it's just really a beautiful thing to witness.
Mm-hmm. You talked about the yearly convention there. I'm sorry, what was the name of the convention again?
It's PhilCon, and it's they do that every year, and it happens in New Jersey, in Cherry Hill, which is right over the bridge from Philly. But that's like the big, huge sci-fi convention. And then ECBOC, which is the East Coast Black Age of Comics, which was started by Yumi Odom, which is like the first black sci-fi themed convention ever, I believe. And he's based in Philly. So there is really, when I say there's a history here, of course, Samuel Delaney, he lives in Philly and he teaches at Temple University. So it's really a strong community here, I think.
And do you attend many conventions? I mean, I know there's the ones locally that are really easy to get to, but do you do any national travel?
No, I haven't had an opportunity, unfortunately. I would love to get down to Atlanta. Their black sci-fi community is growing, and they do alien encounters and, a couple other things go down in Georgia. So I would love to get down there one day. And then you have the Black Futurists over in San Francisco who are doing stuff. And, there's lots of places that I would love to. I do get to travel occasionally for work, but, I never really time it right to be able to go to some of this stuff. But hopefully I can one day.
Well, and also, again, if you are traveling anywhere, if you're going to be on a panel, something like that, please, be sure to post it up so people can find you. Obviously you've spoken well of Octavia Butler and her influence. Who are some of the other authors that are influences for you that you like? I mean, it sounds like you tend more toward the hard science fiction authors rather than, the kind of like the fantasy genre.
Right.
Who would you say, that you could remember or that you can think of who was influential in someone you really enjoy, people you really enjoy to read?
So I really love Tanana Reeves-Dew's books. Her series is great, and it's been a big inspiration to me. I like Philip K. Dick. I've read a few of his things. An author named Ted Chiang. He wrote a book of short stories called Stories of Your Life, and he writes the sort of stories that I would love to write, sort of hard sci-fi, exploring sort of the everyday possibilities of something that seems, a little far out. So I really enjoyed his work, and he's had a big influence on me. Short stories by Ursula K. Le Guin I've liked, and her novel, The Lathe of Heaven, is one of my favorite books. And really, I read a lot of short stories, so I have like a good 100 sci-fi anthologies full of short stories, and I just naturally comb through and look for time travel stories. So I've read, I would like to say I've read every time travel story out there. I'm sure I haven't, but I've read a lot of time travel stories, just short stories that, as I don't really so much have time these days to read full novels, so, short stories work better for me. And then, I'm also just doing a lot of research, so most of my leisure reading goes into doing research around, physics, quantum physics and stuff. But a lot of Black sci-fi, Black Science Fiction Society authors, people you would find on there, I've read their stuff over the past couple years and, have been hugely inspired. So Nicole Sconyers, like I said earlier, she featured at my ball, and she wrote a book of short stories which were amazing. And, she's just such a great writer. Her prose, really inspires me, as somebody who's contemporary and sort of independent. And, just quite a few, Valjean Jeffers, reading her stuff. And, I've been just really inspired by people's hustles and, what they've been doing for years, and not always getting that mainstream recognition, but just keep plugging away and successful in their own right, So it's just, I've been really inspired by that.
And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mention Frederick Poole just died a couple days ago, who was one of my favorite science fiction writers. He just passed away. I think he was 92.
Oh, wow.
Which is,
and
he was a great editor as well. It doesn't, you have like one or two of what I would consider classic science fiction authors, who are from, that golden age of science fiction. I grew up with all of them, Asimov and Heinlein and
right.
I mean, way back. My dad he had a subscription to Amazing Tales, which turned into Analog. I read that all the time. I love short stories, and I'm not a very good short story writer, but to be able to convey a great story like that in such a, in that few words, I'm so untalented. It takes me 500 words or 500 pages to tell a single story. But I mean, there are all kinds of people. I mean, and time travel is tough. I mean, just from the physics alone, to go ahead and postulate the fact that you can go forward in time when entropy kind of implies that you really can go only go back in time, is there's a lot to that. And as you have said, in terms of studying your science to get it all right, this is one of those areas where you can't just say, well, we know exactly what time travel is going to be like. I mean, we can pretty much figure out what a computer is going to be like 10 years from now. Right. I mean, we can imagine what a computer is going to be like 50 years from now. They'll be faster, and we'll be able to talk to them, and you won't have to Control-Alt-Delete them every day because you have memory creep. Those are the sorts of things that we can imagine, and those are the things that are more accessible, I think, to us creatively. But to take on something like time travel, going back in time and talking about, making a story about history, that's not nearly as hard as trying to postulate, well, what would happen if you could get in a time machine and you went 100 years ahead?
Yeah.
You know, that's fully speculative, and that's the sort of thing that I think really stretches the chops of a writer.
Right. Right.
Is your interest in time travel bidirectional, or do you look at it from the perspective of going back in time and maybe taking current technology or current knowledge back with you? Or do you look at it from the perspective of, let's take a speculative look and see if really we have a two-tiered society and one tier eats the other one, you know, like in the time machine? How do you look at time travel in your lexicon?
Well, so one thing I'll mention first that has sort of had an influence on me tackling the matter of time travel is Octavia Butler's novel Kindred. And one thing that's interesting about Kindred is that, you know, there is no time machine in that novel. She goes back, you know, into the antebellum South. She sort of just appears there or is pulled back there to save her great, et cetera, grandfather, you know, from death. And, you know, that really, you know, when you think about sort of the time travel tropes, the typical ones, the one that, the big one is the grandfather paradox. And it really, I think, turns that on its head and just takes that, and I don't know if she did that on purpose or not, but it takes that whole concept and it, you know, it either resolves it or doesn't, you know, finds a way around it in a sort of interesting way. You know, so I was inspired by that, and not only in the sense of it, you know, the time travel itself, but how she was able to explore slavery using that trope and using present-day knowledge to sort of go back and be able to survive through, you know, slavery. And I just think about that because when we think about cultural memory and how that's transmitted and then compare that to history and what's written in the books, you know, it's two vastly different universes. And so for her to be able to sort of marry that and then, you know, take this grandfather paradox and do something different when, you know, time travel tropes tell you that you really kind of can't do that, you know, was really interesting to me. So anyway, so that said, that I was really inspired by that notion. And then also, I don't like being told I can't do something. And every sort of time travel thing I've read is like, oh, that's impossible. Oh, there's this paradox, or oh, there's this uncertain death that's going to happen, or there's this, you know, it's very, you know, hands-off, privileged matter, you know, and who can build a time machine and get in it and do something, you know. But in my mind, you can time travel is not necessarily being able to travel, hop into it. You know, it's time travel can happen through memory. It can happen through reflection. You know, there's mental time travel, and this whole notion of your body having to travel back with you and these things being impossible to do, you know, is wrapped up in sort of these physics theories that when you really delve into them and explore them and sort of find out the history and the culture and the politics around why laws of physics are what they are, you know, to me, I'm interested in breaking that down and not being told that I can't time travel because, you know, Einstein said, you know, 50 years ago, and he didn't have, you know, and he didn't like quantum physics. He thought it was, you know, he called it spooky action at a distance, and he, you know, sort of refused to accept the principles of it, and, you know, just things like that, you know, that inform our worldview and our view of what's possible and what's not possible. You know, I can't accept that, you know, personally, that something's impossible. You know, when science itself tells me that's not necessarily true, you know, the updated science anyway. So that's really more so what time travel, the view I'm looking at it from, and how this breaking down what time travel is can open us up to possibilities personally, and then, you know, moving on from that as a collective and as a community and as a world and then as a universe. So my story, I wrote the story first as a short story, and then the more I got into it and the complications of time and what that is, the longer it became. And so from there, it did become a world. So what started off as a story, which was more personal, than anything, and my thoughts about memory and time travel, then I built a world upon it so that now there is different things that are going on in the story and other short stories that are interrelated that then explore that time travel notion, which was personal, and explores it in a larger society, in a larger world. So there's another story that I wrote that's connected to the first one that does have a machine that's a time travel machine, but that's something that anybody can use to sort of explore time travel. And that machine is actually based on a real machine. It's called the PTSD, and it's like the psychotemporal something. I can't even remember what I called it, but
okay.
It's a play on words because it's PTSD, and it's talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and also post-traumatic slavery disorder. So the what it's supposed to invoke is that you can explore memory through this machine, and it's really based on a real therapy where it's electromagnetic. I'm blanking on names right now, but it's a machine where people use for therapy, and it's connected directly to your brain waves, and you can do different things with it. It helps people improve memory and things like that. So based on that machine, I sort of make this other machine where you can explore time travel mentally and project yourself into a different scene. And so it's really, again, just breaking down what I've been told about the possibility of time travel and not making it, so fantastical that it's impossible for anybody to ever explore. When science, different theories of time and time travel tell me that, time travel is very much a possibility, and, it maybe have a low probability of actually happening, but it's still a possibility and a good one, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got the book you're working on. You've done short stories. Do you have a few more short stories in the hopper? Do you have anything new coming out soon?
Yes, I do. I have a couple of different stories. I have maybe like 4 short stories that I want to put all together in a book, and they all deal with this concept of time travel, and they're all interconnected stories. They're different stories, but they're interconnected, and they have a thread that runs through them around this concept of time travel. So I have some of those, and some of those stories explore, like I said, like real life sort of things. So like one story is called The Bracelet, which was published in the short sci-fi anthology, and it's about teen pregnancy and sort of really deals with my experiences as a young mother, but of course through a fictional character. And so I have that, and I do have a couple different things, and I'm really just trying to finish up this book and hopefully get it out by the end of the year, because it's mostly done. It's just, again, doing the research and just doing the layout, because it's a non-traditional sort of layout. It's taken a lot of time, and So.
And okay, so those are things that you've done. Have you ever done any collaborative work?
No, not yet. I mean, I have some stuff that I'm supposed to be working on with my collective. We're trying to build a world because other people who are in the collective write sci-fi as well, and they have different topics and interests. Like one person who's in our collective writes about cyborgs, and that's sort of their thing, and another writes about superheroes, and another writes about aliens. So we're all trying to like build a world together and do some collaborative writing. But I really sort of want to focus on getting my stuff out there first before I really engage deep into some collaborative stuff.
Yeah, writing
wise anyway.
Sure. And who right now are your critics? Like when you're writing, do you show your work to other people? Do you show it to your daughter, whomever, and get some feedback, or is your writing style more insular than that?
It's mostly insular, but I try to. It's because I feel like I'm never done. I feel like I'm never like. I have a draft that I'm satisfied with, so I tend not to show it to other people. But I have shared it, and I've been fortunate enough to share it with author Valjean Jeffers, and she's given me some suggestions and edits and things like that. And she's going to further edit my book once I've completed it. So I've gotten her feedback, which was like hugely helpful. And friends definitely have. I've read a lot of my stuff, at friends' events and stuff, and things I've done through the organization. And I haven't really gotten any critics. I think people are just sort of waiting for what I consider to be a finished product, and then I'll send it out and hopefully get some feedback. But from what I have, put out so far, I have gotten a lot of positive feedback, and I think the biggest compliment I ever got is after reading one of my stories is, wow, you really know your science. So that was like a huge compliment to me. I don't know if my narrative is any good or my, writing, but at least I know my science. So.
Well, you're lucky because people beat me over the head for that. They go, man, you got a lot of science up in here, and it's like you made it too hard for me. So I struggle with that too, going back and forth with trying to strike that exact right balance.
Right.
When you get close to the end of what you're doing, when you get close to the end of maybe doing a story or doing the book, are you very, very critical, self-critical, or are you able to look at it pretty objectively, to try to judge whether it's going in the right direction, does it strike the right balance, things like that? How hard a critic are you on yourself?
I'm very hard on myself, and it's really difficult for me at a point to separate myself from the story and really give it, an objective eye, because it gets to a point where I'm just like, I'm wrapped up in it, and I can't really separate myself to, like, give it that view. So it's definitely something that, once the time is right, I'm definitely going to give to other people because I cannot rely on myself to, like, say this is good to go. I wish.
Sure. And do you have, it sounds like you got a ton of people in the area who support your endeavor, who just support the art, of creation. And finding a network of those kind of people is a very lucky thing. Would you, you talked about doing a massive collaborative world. They're not coming for you, are they?
No. No.
Okay, because I'll tell them that you've been on the air for the last hour and a half, and whatever happened, you didn't have anything to do with.
Right.
But with all of those creative people around you, do you find it supportive and easy? Kind of like easier for your creative process because you have those supportive people, especially in light of the fact that you tend to be very, very critical of your own work.
Yeah, I think it has made it easier for me, and I think that's the thing I was sort of searching for, that inspired me in part to form this organization is wanting that supportive community around what I was doing. And like I said, I kind of had that even before in terms of, like, I had a writing group that I was a part of, but then that disbanded. And, so I wanted something a little more permanent, and being able to, like, do that through friends who are also engaged in the arts it has definitely made it easier and just more supportive and more fun to do. And it's not like a job. It's create. Part of it is a job, and part of it, you do have to work and be responsible for your creative output if that's how you see your art. But it's definitely just made it a lot easier for me to have people who also just know what I'm going through, so like the collective that I'm a part of, I routinely, write to them and say things like, yo, I'm feeling this way about my work, or I'm sad because I haven't put this out yet, and they're like, oh, I understand, I'm going through the same thing, just so hold on, or, so we bounce things off of each other, and any little ideas that we come up with, or we get excited for each other when, we've struck upon something, we share each other's stuff. So it's really, it's great. And, even people who are sort of not necessarily a part of the culture, but just find it interesting and like what I'm doing and like what my collaborators are doing. They're supportive as well. So people who come out to our events and who just might have come across it and said, hey, this looks interesting. I don't know what it's about, but I'm going to take the chance and go to it and and support this. And I'm just like really grateful for that, and I'm grateful to have this culture to be able to use as an outlet for that kind of work.
Okay, and then how about, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of you as a content creator. How do you go about marketing the work that you've done?
So I use every resource at my disposal in terms of the internet and what you're able to do in terms of promoting yourself. So I think what I have been able to do just as a consumer of the internet is just figure out what works on what site. So sort of every site has its own personality, Twitter, Tumblr, things like that. So I utilize those sites for what they're worth, in terms of how each site works. And I've been able to do that and sort of integrate that knowledge into what I'm doing, and I think that makes it a lot easier to promote myself. And also, I think I in terms of content on my blog, I do things that I would want to see done, like in terms of what I like. Like I don't like always super long posts or, sometimes I just like a headline and a picture that I can come back to. And so, I find that for some people that works. I really pay attention to what people like and what people, appreciate about the blog, and I try to do that and replicate that. And I think it's been successful so far. I don't think I've had too many complaints. And also, I just also try not to put, some blogs or content, is very opinion heavy. And I don't like that style for myself because, I have a lot of different roles to balance in my life in terms of being an attorney and being, a mother and things like that. So in respect of that balance and in how one thing affects another part of my life, I try not to be, necessarily too controversial or too, I'll put my opinion, definitely, but I try to do it in a way that is, it gets the point across without being offensive or being, stepping on anybody's toes, and just trying to respect everybody in a sense, because it's meant to encourage and promote and be a positive thing, and also be an outlet of news and things going on, and both not just the Afrofuturist community, but in the broader community, things that I find important and that other people find important in terms of education. So, things like what's happening in Philly with all the schools closing, I consider that to be Afrofuturism. I mean, it's not sci-fi, it's a real thing, but it concerns the future, and it concerns where we're going. So I think that's relevant, as a part of Afrofuturism. So I put that on my blog. And so it's not just specific to Black sci-fi. And I think people sort of appreciate that, and appreciate that as being how I define or how I interpret Afrofuturism, finding these things relevant, even though they may not necessarily be sci-fi or, strictly Afrofuturism.
Well, you're an attorney, and your name as a writer, as a content creator, is out there. Do you ever find yourself self-censoring because, for career-based reasons? Do
Yes.
you find yourself not saying something or saying something in a different way because what if the greater legal community takes a look at this? It may come back and bite me in the butt. I mean,
most definitely.
You do have those kinds of considerations?
Yeah, because, in terms of my legal career, I'm always, an attorney. I'm on 24 hours a day. I have
right.
a certain image that I have to project, and a certain sense of professionalism. Before I went to law school, I was very wild and, not necessarily wild, but I had piercings in my face, and I had turquoise hair, and, I was very expressive and through my image. And then once I went to law school, I really had to tone it down because, in terms of who I would want representing me and how I would want that person to present themselves, I wanted to be able to do that for my clients and be as professional an advocate and as possible. So in that sense, I have to very much keep abreast of my image and what's going on. And even outside of Afrofuturist Affair, just period, because, my story as a young mother, I had a lot of spotlight because of the fact that I was graduating early, and I was able to be successful in spite of, my circumstances. So I've been interviewed. I've been in the newspaper a lot. I've been on, various radio shows just talking about my story. And so, I want to be respectful of my job. I love my job, and it's such a great place to work. And not just because of the work we do, but the people who work there, are really just doing some groundbreaking things around the country. And I want to always be able to be a part of that and not do anything to compromise that. So I definitely censor myself, but not in a way that doesn't still get the opinion across. I think I'm very good at code switching and being able to, present things in a way that's, still gets it across, still, drives home the point of it, but is not unprofessional or. But, there are times also where it's just I'm passionate about something, and I have to be real about how I feel about it and necessarily not censor it. And there are those moments, I have had those moments, but and I think I know how to rein it in and sort of just present things in a way that's
well, you still have a job, so
right.
Obviously you haven't, you haven't done anything that obviously has crossed the line.
Right.
But it is apparent, from what you said, that you do have to watch yourself because you have to be aware of the fact that you're wearing more than one hat.
Right. And, my job, being an attorney has helped me to be able to do that because, on a day-to-day basis, I'm dealing with very controversial subject matter. It's, poverty, people of color, how they're being treated in the legal system, things like that. And, I have to write, briefs and memos and, I have to file things in court, and I have to write, I do a lot of policy advocacy, too. So, I know how to attack a controversial subject while using professional language, so that has carried over into those endeavors.
Mm-hmm. How do you like being a lawyer? I mean, just the law itself. Do you like the mechanism of law, and do you like the process of our legal system?
Not at all. And I tell people that all the time, like, I love my job. I am not very fond of my career. Being an attorney, that in and of itself is not very fitting of my personality, I don't think. I mean, I'm able to do it, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But it's, in terms of what you think of when you call to mind an attorney, I'm probably the last thing that a lot of people would think of, for whatever reasons. But that said, I recognize it as a powerful tool. Even though I don't necessarily like it or like, what happens or what goes on or the culture of lawyering, is not. But that's in a very specific context because prior to going to law school, I had no idea that there was a public interest area of law, that served poor people or the interests of people who, are typically underrepresented in the law. So once I came across that area of law, it was a perfect fit for me. And, if as long as I get to do this, then I'm perfectly okay with being a lawyer. It is, my style in terms of lawyering, and I'm in court a lot, I'm in court maybe 2 or 3 times a week, doing hearings and things like that. I'm very conciliatory for the most part. I try my best to mediate. And some things, what we have to consider being a success or victory when you're working with poor people or, impoverished people is different than, what you might see on TV, and a success is for us is keeping a person in their house for two more months, so to get them through the winter. It's not necessarily slam dunk. We win this. So the meaning of winning and success is very different. When you're working with the population that I work with, and and I am wearing different hats. Not just an attorney. Sometimes I'm a social worker. Sometimes I'm a counselor or somebody just to vent to. So in that sense, getting to be a lawyer in this context is satisfying. But I think if I had to do it in any other context, I would not be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your daughter. Do you think that she has any desire whatsoever to follow in your footsteps?
No.
As far as getting into the law? Okay.
No. I have asked her. She is not into it. She wants to do acting, but she does want to go to Temple, so that's awesome. Super close.
Like stage acting or movies?
Both, I think. I think she's into both, and I think just creative arts, period. I mean, she also likes science a little bit, but she likes, and also she does sports, but I think she wants to do acting. But, that could all change, just a year or two she wanted to be a chef, so.
And so if you were going to pick your perfect ideal job, that you would have to do other than just doing the creative writing, do you think you'd still be doing what you're doing now? Sounds like a good fit for you.
It is a great fit. If I could craft my perfect job, though, I think, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what it would be. It would definitely be working with people and clients. I mean, my dream before going into law was to open up a teen parent program and run that and run a community center. So I think my perfect job would be something along those lines. If I could start like a sort of an Afrofuturist Affair Institute and run it as a community organization, full time, I would love to do something like that. But then again, I don't know if I could be my own boss too, though. I kind of like being, I like the autonomy of my job to where, I have a sort of important position, but I'm not the boss. I don't have to sort of tell other people what to do necessarily, and, I kind of like that. I don't know if I could run something, but,
Well, bossing people around is not easy. I mean, it's the one thing, no, I'm serious. I mean, having to deal with a staff or having to hire and fire or, somebody's, circumstance at home and yet they've done something that is inexcusable on the job and then they've got to go. I mean, all of that is tough, dealing with people. Do you find that you obviously you like the advocacy that you do, but do you generally really like getting out and being with the people and doing what you're doing with the people directly? Are you like a people person? I love connecting with people. I can't say I'm a people person. I'm sort of both. I mean, I'm very insular and introverted at times, but I can also engage with people and I can be social when it comes to it, when there's a need. So I'm sort of both, I love working with clients. I don't think I could. I like doing policy work and doing writing and things like that, but I don't think I could not work with people. I need to be engaged. I need to be connected to people. I need to be working with and talk to people. It is something that's satisfying to me, even though it, on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it is tiring and it is very draining, and some days I don't. Just like anybody, I guess. Some days you don't feel like engaging with people, and there's days when I don't want to be in court, I don't want to talk to people, and I'd rather just sit in the corner by myself. When it comes to it, I don't think I would be complete if I wasn't, working with people. And so, okay, if the follow-up to that is, for me to ask you, is it sounds like writing is a good creative outlet, but it's not the be-all to end-all to how you engage the rest of the world.
It's not. It's a important, very important tool, and I feel compelled to write. I mean, it's you know, it's not always a fun thing. It's sometimes stressful to feel like you have to do it, like, you know, and not have to as in somebody else is making you, but something inside of you is like, you have to write. You're not going to feel complete or good about yourself until you get this out. And so sometimes it's that, you know, and it's like a monkey on your back sort of thing. But it's definitely it's something I'm good at. It's something I feel confident that I'm good at, and I don't feel like I'm good or talented at very many things, but I feel like writing is one of them, and so for me it is a very important tool, but it is not, you know, the only tool. I definitely think, you know, word of mouth and being able to commune with people in person, you know, is just as important as that tool.
Well, I mean, that's great, and let me remind people who are listening that if they want to take a closer look at some of your work, they can find you at www.afrofuturistaffair.com. And if they want to take a look at your Tumblr, it's afrofuturistafffair.tumblr.com. And then to follow you on Twitter, you just misspelled everything. It's Afrofutur, AFROFUTUR affair. So twitter.com at AFROFUTUR affair for people who want to follow you. Do you get much feedback over the internet about your work? Do you have enough of it out there that people can kind of check it out and see and take a good look at you as a writer? And if you do, you know, do people find you on the web and critique you, or do you get any feedback for the work that you've done that way?
So I don't think actually much of my fictional work is online except the one story that's a part of the short sci-fi anthology Possibilities.
Sure.
So that's really the only fictional work that's online, because again, I don't want to sort of put out stuff until I feel like it's super complete and, you know, I'm ready to sort of release my book. So I think then that's when people will be able to sort of really find some of my fictional work. That said, there is a lot of my non-fictional work out there. I've written a couple of different essays and blog posts about black sci-fi phenomena and metaphysics and things like that. I used to run a personal blog called astromytholosophy.com, and it was a lot of metaphysical writing and poetry and things like that pertaining to the universe, and I ran that blog for a couple of years. This was way before I started the organization and the Tumblr blog. And that got a lot of good feedback. You know, at one point, you know, I received a lot of comments from people about the different things that I was writing about and had some really good conversations. But that stuff isn't necessarily structured writing. It's, again, more just like blog and me working through some of my, you know, metaphysical crises. But when I engaged in the State of Black Science Fiction blog hop last year, that's the bulk of my sort of critical black sci-fi pieces came out of that activity. And yeah, I got some good feedback on it. Got a lot of reblogs and reposts on, you know, throughout the internet. So I have gotten some good feedback, and, you know, I appreciate people engaging in these topics and, you know, really being open-minded about how black sci-fi phenomena applies in, you know, the real world and the sort of the psychological context that we were talking about earlier.
Well, and the other good thing is, I mean, it's not so much your feedback and your support group is not really online. It sounds like you've got a great community there in Philly that really supports people's creative endeavors, and that's a great community to belong to in and of itself. Right.
And I think, you know, once I put out my writing, creative writing, and also I have been published in other things, again, non-fiction work. I've had a bunch of, like, inspirational essays about, you know, being a young mother. That stuff has been published, but when my sci-fi gets published, then that's when I will, once I release that baby, I'll feel, a lot more comfortable, and I hope people will give me feedback about it. I'm just really anxious to get that product out there so I can start. Because, the writing, the sci-fi writing, it's really important, and it is the catalyst for these other activities, and this, these events and these other things that I do. The catalyst for that was reading and writing sci-fi and being exposed to, other black sci-fi writers. So
Sure. Well, as I said, be sure to post up any events and even milestones, in the events calendar at the BSFS, and blog there, and people can click on your account. I'm sure find your other blog sites and things like that if they want to keep track of you. But I don't think I've run into anybody with as much energy as you, and does as well. I'm serious. I'm just being honest. Who does as much as you do, and does it with so much energy. Writing is a singular pursuit, and a lot of people who don't get immediate gratification or immediate substantiation of their worth have a hard time sustaining that kind of energy, because you do get disheartened, but it doesn't seem to have slowed you down a bit. And, whatever challenges you had being a young single mother, obviously didn't have any deleterious effect on you, or at least in your productivity and your enthusiasm. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
We're running out of time now. What I want to do is I want to remind people, we've been talking to Rasheedah Phillips. Well, actually, if we were to be official, you would be an Esquire, right? Rasheedah
Yes.
Phillips, Esquire.
Yes, sir.
And she has just whipped, the Afrofuturist term into doing her bidding. And for those of you who want to check her out, go to www.AFROFUTURISTAffair.com, or check out her Tumblr at afrofuturistaffair.tumblr.com. And if you want to follow her on Twitter, it's spelled messed up, so it's AFROFUTUR affair. So she left off the E there. This has been the September 6th edition, 2013. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for making my job easier. And I want to remind everybody to check out the show, tell other people about it. It starts on or about 9 p.m. Eastern Time, follows the clock all the way west, every Friday night. And for those of you who may have missed an episode, go ahead, check out the podcast. All of the older shows are available for you to listen to. And I think what we're going to do, Rasheedah, is we're going to check in with you a little bit later, okay? A few months down the road, see what you're up to, see what's new and exciting in your life. And hopefully our skipper is back. Apparently he went and took a road trip while you and I were on the air. And I'm going to turn things over to him so he can say his good night.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was a great interview. I really appreciate your questions and your thoughtful, commentary, and it was wonderful.
Thank you very much. And Skipper, what you got to say for us?
Oh, I was just saying, thank you, Rasheedah, so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on, to have a kindred spirit express similar views and concepts and things of that nature. I've really been sitting back enjoying this. I've been getting comments from other people on Facebook and on the site about how personable you are, how humble, and how inspirational you are. You're an inspiration to me as well.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, really, it's real talk, as they say. And also to William for always supporting us in this project and doing such a great job with the interviews. This could not be possible without the help and the participation of the site members. And I want to thank everyone that's participated, everyone in the chat room, everyone on the website, Facebook, Twitter, all of that. But wonderful show, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you want to hang around a few minutes after the recording is stopped, if anybody, oh, wait, you're not in front of a computer, are you?
I'm not, unfortunately.
All right. Well, in that case, we're going to bring the show to a close. We'll see you all next week. Same time, same place. And I just wish everybody a great weekend ahead. Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.